8 Apache girls left to dying upside down, but Mountain Man did the unthinkable. The morning air in the high desert of northern Arizona was crisp and alive. The sun had just begun to peek over the jagged horizon, painting the cliffs with a soft golden glow. 8 Apache girls, full of energy and curiosity, had gathered at the base of a cliff they had only ever seen from afar. This was not a usual hike or a walk through familiar trails. It was a challenge. The cliff rose like a stone giant from the earth, its sharp edges and hidden crevices daring anyone to climb it. Each girl carried a small backpack filled with water, snacks, and climbing gear. Their ropes were neatly coiled, carabiners glinting in the morning light. Excitement buzzed through the group. They whispered and laughed, teasing each other about who would reach the top first. But deep down, every one of them felt a mixture of nerves and thrill. This cliff was dangerous, even for experienced climbers, but the girls were confident. They had trained together for months, learning the ropes, literally and figuratively, and now this was their moment. The tallest girl, Marissa, was the unofficial leader. She checked the ropes one last time, knot by knot, making sure everything was secure. "We stick together," she said firmly, her voice calm but commanding. "We go slow, we watch each other, and we don't take risks we can't handle." The others nodded, their faces a mix of determination and excitement. With that, they began their ascent, climbing carefully along the rocky surface. The first few hours went smoothly. They helped each other over tricky ledges and through narrow gaps, encouraging each other with words of support. The canyon echoed with laughter and occasional shouts of triumph whenever someone made it past a difficult patch. From above, the cliffs looked intimidating, but close up, the girls found patterns in the rock that made climbing possible. They were learning to read the stone as if it were a map, finding holds for hands and feet, and trusting each other's guidance. But nature has a way of reminding humans that it cannot be tamed. By mid-afternoon, the wind began to pick up. At first, it was a gentle whisper, tugging at their clothes and hair, playful in its teasing. But soon, dark clouds gathered over the canyon, swirling with a strange energy. The girls paused to watch the sky.
"Looks like a storm," whispered Taya, the youngest of the group, her voice trembling slightly. Marissa studied the clouds, her brow furrowing.
"We should head down," she said. "I don't like the way the wind is moving."
"Let's make it quick and safe." But as they began to descend, the wind strengthened, gusting in sudden bursts.
The ropes swung slightly, and the girls had to grip the rock harder to keep their balance. The cliffside that had seemed so friendly in the morning now felt like a living, breathing challenge. Then it happened. A gust stronger than any before, ripping across the canyon. One by one, the girls found themselves leaning in ways they hadn't planned. Their ropes twisted and caught on the rock, leaving them dangling upside down or sideways in positions that made it nearly impossible to move. Panic crept in quickly. Shouts filled the air as they struggled to find stability, their voices mingling with the howling wind. "Stay calm! Listen to me! Don't panic!" Her words were firm, but even she felt her stomach tighten at the sight of her friends trapped in precarious positions. She glanced at the ledges below and realized that a single misstep could send them sliding down the cliff. It wasn't just the height. They were stuck, and the storm was turning the rocks slick with rain. Every movement was a gamble. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. The girls tried to communicate with each other, checking who could move and who needed help. They attempted to untangle their ropes, but the wind kept tossing them, making simple tasks nearly impossible. Each girl had a rope tied securely around her waist, and anchor points that should have held, but the storm made everything unpredictable. Fear mixed with fatigue, and soon their muscles ached from holding themselves in place. Despite the danger, the girls supported one another, They whispered encouragements, shared water and snacks, and reminded each other to breathe. "We can do this," Marissa said, her voice steady even as her hands shook. "We've trained for hard climbs. We know what to do." Each girl nodded, drawing strength from her friends. They weren't alone, even though the canyon felt enormous and isolating. As the afternoon turned to evening, the storm showed no sign of stopping. The clouds darkened further, and a light drizzle began to fall. The cliff became slippery, every movement a careful calculation. The girls' laughter was gone now, replaced by focused breathing and careful strategy. They had been excited in the morning, but now survival became their only thought. From the canyon floor, any passerby would have seen a small group of figures, barely visible, fighting against gravity and wind. The storm seemed almost to mock them, testing their courage, patience, and resilience. Each girl learned the importance of trust, not just in the ropes or gear, but in each other. The bonds they had built over months of training became their lifeline. Every word, every gesture mattered more than ever. Night began to fall, bringing with it cold and darkness. The girls' faces were pale from fear and exhaustion, but they held on. They knew the cliff could be unforgiving, and they could not afford mistakes. Their journey had started as a test of skill and bravery, but now it was a test of endurance, courage, and heart. And though they were trapped upside down, with no clear way down, none of them gave up. Marissa looked over at her friends, her eyes scanning each one, making sure they were safe. "We have to stay together," she whispered. "No one moves alone. We wait."
"We plan, and we survive."
The girls nodded, holding on to each other in the ropes that tethered them to life. The storm raged on, the wind howled, and the canyon seemed endless. But within this circle of determination and trust, hope remained. And so, as the first part of the story closes, the 8 Apache girls dangled upside down on the cliffside, caught in a battle between fear and courage, storm and stone, but still alive. Each girl learned that true strength was not in the speed of the climb or the thrill of adventure. It was in patience, trust, and the will to survive, even when the mountain seemed impossible. Little did they know, help was on the way. Night had fallen over the canyon, and a cold wind swept through the cliffs like a restless spirit. The 8 Apache girls, still dangling upside down from their ropes, were now fully aware of how isolated they were. The storm that had started in the afternoon had grown stronger, and the rain now fell steadily, soaking their clothes and making the rocks slippery. Each drop of water felt heavier than the last, and their muscles were burning from holding onto the ropes for hours. At first they had tried to stay positive, whispering jokes and encouraging words to one another. But as darkness settled and the wind howled louder, their laughter faded. The canyon echoed with only the sound of rain and their own breathing. Even the bravest among them felt fear creep into their hearts. They were trapped in a strange, upside-down world where every movement could bring pain or disaster. The thought of staying there all night was terrifying, yet there was no clear way down. Taya, the youngest, shivered uncontrollably. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, her voice almost drowned by the wind. Marissa, trying to stay calm, reached out to touch her shoulder. "It's okay, Taya," she said. "We're together.
We'll get through this. Just breathe."
One step at a time, even if that step is just holding on. The girls held on to each other, forming a small circle of warmth and trust. In a moment like this, friendship felt more important than anything else. Time seemed to slow. Every second felt stretched, every movement deliberate. Their hands were raw from gripping the ropes. Their arms ached, and their legs trembled. They had to rotate carefully to relieve pressure, but the ropes were tangled, and the wind kept swinging them slightly. Small slips caused sudden jolts, making them gasp and cling even tighter. It was exhausting both physically and mentally. Yet none of them gave up. Survival required patience and focus, and they were determined to hold on. Down below, the canyon floor was dark and silent. Even if someone had tried to reach them from the bottom, the cliffs were too steep and jagged. The canyon seemed endless, an unforgiving barrier separating them from safety. They realized that their only hope lay in someone who knew the cliffs well, someone who could climb in these conditions, but who could be brave or skilled enough to save them in the middle of a storm. For now, all they could do was wait, watch, and hope. The girls tried to keep their minds busy. They sang softly, told stories about their childhood, and reminded each other of past adventures they had survived. Sharing memories helped to calm them, even if only slightly. Each girl learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was choosing to keep going despite the fear. When Marissa suggested they check on each other's rope knots again, they moved carefully, knowing one mistake could cost them dearly. Even with exhaustion setting in, they followed her lead with quiet determination. As the night deepened, fatigue became their greatest enemy. The cold seeped through their clothes, numbing their fingers and toes. Every shift of weight demanded more effort than before, and small injuries from scrapes on the rock reminded them of the dangers around them. Yet the girls refused to panic. Instead, they shared encouragement. "You can do it. Hold on. We're okay." Each phrase was repeated like a protective charm, a small barrier against despair. Meanwhile, back in the small town near the canyon, the girls' families were frantic. Word had spread quickly that the group had not returned. Parents, siblings, and friends gathered at the ranger station pleading for help. Search teams were organized, flashlights and ropes in hand, but the storm made it nearly impossible to get close. Helicopters tried to navigate the gusting wind, but the canyon walls blocked their view, and rain made the air unsafe for flight. Anxiety gripped everyone. The thought of the girls trapped on the cliffs, alone in the storm, was unbearable. In the canyon, the girls clung to hope. Marissa encouraged them to conserve energy, stay warm, and talk to each other. They passed around small sips of water, reminding each other to eat the snacks they had brought, even if it was just a few bites. Their teamwork became essential. They had to watch for signs of fatigue in one another, adjust positions when someone needed a break, and reassure those who were panicking. This moment tested not only their physical endurance, but also their emotional strength. Some of the girls noticed the wildlife around them. A lone owl hooted from a distant tree, and small gusts carried the scent of wet earth and sagebrush. Even in the terrifying situation, the natural world reminded them of life continuing, of the quiet resilience that exists in every living being. It was a strange comfort, proof that danger did not have to mean the end, that survival was still possible if they stayed alert and patient. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. The girls lost track of time. Darkness was complete, and only occasional flashes of lightning lit the cliffs, briefly revealing their precarious positions. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, but the wind continued to challenge them. Every girl had moments of doubt, but every time one felt despair, another offered a gentle word or a hand to hold. There were no longer just 8 girls hanging from ropes. They were a team, united by necessity, courage, and care. Marissa took stock of the situation. She examined each rope, each knot, and each friend. No one was injured severely, but fatigue and fear were growing.
"We need to stay calm," she whispered.
"We'll make it. We just have to stay calm." The girls repeated the words, a mantra against the chaos of the storm. They reminded each other of their strengths, their skills, and their ability to survive. It was this mental strength, combined with careful attention, that kept them alive. Somewhere in the distance, far above the canyon walls, a figure watched the storm. A local mountain man, known in nearby towns for his skill and experience in climbing the cliffs, had heard of the girl's predicament. He knew the canyon as if it were part of his own body. The rocks, the crevices, the safest paths. While everyone else waited helplessly, he prepared himself to climb into the storm. He gathered ropes, harnesses, and supplies, his mind focused on only one goal: reaching the girls safely. Back on the cliff, the girls did not yet know that help was on the way, but instinctively, they felt the importance of staying alert and resilient. They adjusted their positions, keeping ropes tight, communicating in whispers, and reminding one another that survival was possible. The night was long, the storm was relentless, and the canyon seemed endless. But in that darkness, they discovered the power of teamwork, trust, and quiet courage. By the time the first faint hint of moonlight appeared, the girls were exhausted but alive. They had survived a night that would have broken many others, and although they could not see the mountain man yet, they held on to hope, because they knew that courage, patience, and care could carry them through the hardest moments. As dawn approached, a new day promised new challenges, but also a glimmer of hope. The storm would eventually pass, and someone who knew the cliffs would come to help them. In the meantime, the 8 Apache girls continued to hold on to each other, proving that even in the most frightening situations, resilience and friendship could make the impossible seem possible. The first light of dawn was soft and pale, touching the jagged cliffs with a quiet golden glow. The storm had weakened slightly, leaving the rain as a gentle drizzle, and the wind, though still strong, no longer whipped across the canyon with the same fury. The 8 Apache girls were still hanging from their ropes, exhausted but determined. Their muscles ached, and their bodies were stiff from hours of holding on to the cliff, but their spirits remained unbroken. Marissa looked around at her friends, checking each one carefully. "We've made it through the night," she said, her voice steady. "Now we just have to stay calm. We're going to be okay." The other girls nodded, their eyes still wide from fear but glimmering with hope. They knew the night had tested them in ways they had never imagined. But survival had taught them patience, trust, and courage. They had learned that even in impossible situations, staying focused and supporting each other could make the difference between life and death. Meanwhile, far above the canyon, a solitary figure moved along a narrow ridge. Known by locals as the Mountain Man, he had spent decades exploring and climbing the cliffs that towered over the town. People often spoke of him as a recluse, someone who preferred the company of rocks and trees to that of people. But he was also known for his bravery and skill. He knew the cliffs better than anyone, and had a reputation for navigating the most dangerous paths safely. When he heard about the girls trapped on the cliff, he didn't hesitate. The Mountain Man packed his gear quickly but carefully, checking every rope, carabiner, and harness. His movements were precise, practiced, almost instinctive. He carried only what he needed, trusting his experience and knowledge to guide him. He knew the cliffs could be merciless, but he also knew that climbing them was his life, his calling. As he approached the edge of the canyon, he paused for a moment to study the scene. The girls' ropes were visible, faintly shining in the morning light, and he could see their small, tense figures clinging to the rocks. The climb began. With careful, measured movements, he descended into the canyon, his eyes scanning every rock and crevice. The cliffs were steep, and the path was treacherous, but he moved with confidence and purpose. He could feel the canyon beneath him, sense the safest handholds, and calculate the strength needed for each step. The mountain man had faced storms, darkness, and dangerous heights before, but rescuing 8 girls trapped upside down was a challenge unlike any he had encountered. Back on the cliff, the girls noticed movement from above. At first, they weren't sure what it was, a shadow, a rock falling, or someone climbing. But as the figure came closer, they realized it was a man, skillfully navigating the dangerous cliffs. A sense of relief washed over them. They were not alone. Someone had come to help. Taya gasped, pointing, and the other girls leaned toward the edge to see better. For the first time since the storm began, hope felt real. The mountain man approached cautiously, assessing each girl's position. "Stay calm," he called out, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm going to help you. Don't move unless I tell you to." His words were like a lifeline. The girls listened carefully, trusting the stranger who had suddenly appeared to guide them to safety. He examined the ropes, knots, and anchor points, making sure he understood the situation before taking any action. Experience had taught him that careful planning was more important than haste in dangerous situations. He started with the girl closest to him, a delicate balance of skill and caution. Using a combination of ropes and handholds, he stabilized her position, talking to her softly to keep her calm. "You're doing great," he said. "I just need you to stay still for a moment. We're going to get you down safely." The girl nodded, gripping her rope tightly but trusting his guidance. Slowly, methodically, he worked to free her from the most dangerous position. Every movement required attention, precision, and patience. One by one, the mountain man approached the other girls, repeating the process. He checked knots, adjusted ropes, and provided support as each girl regained stability. Occasionally, he had to suspend himself in awkward positions to reach a girl, using his strength and knowledge to prevent slips or falls. The girls, in turn, followed his instructions carefully, learning to stay calm despite the adrenaline and fear racing through their bodies. The teamwork between rescuer and girls was delicate but effective. Hours passed as he continued the rescue. The storm's remnants made the rocks slippery, and sudden gusts of wind challenged every move. But the mountain man never wavered. His patience and experience shone through.
"You're stronger than you think," he told each girl as he helped them maneuver.
"Keep holding on. You're doing perfectly." His encouragement gave them courage, reminding them that survival was possible when one trusted in skill, knowledge, and care. The girls began to notice the difference his presence made. Their fear, though still present, was now mixed with determination. With his guidance, they felt safer, more capable of handling the situation. They adjusted their positions carefully, listened to instructions, and supported one another, creating a rhythm of cooperation and trust. Even in the face of danger, they discovered the power of teamwork, resilience, and calm thinking. As the morning turned to late morning, the rescue neared its most critical stage. The girls were tired, hungry, and soaked from the storm, but they had made it through the hardest part. The mountain man's careful guidance had transformed a desperate situation into a manageable one. Every movement was calculated, and every decision aimed at keeping them safe. The girls could feel their confidence returning, even amid the challenges. Finally, the last girl was stabilized. The mountain man breathed a quiet sigh of relief, but remained focused. One by one, he guided them down to safer ledges where they could sit, rest, and regain strength. Each girl was met with gentle words, careful hands, and reassurance.
"You're doing wonderfully," he said.
Almost there.
Just a few more steps. Slowly, the impossible climb that had seemed like a nightmare became a story of hope, courage, and trust. Once all 8 girls were on more secure ground, the mountain man helped them unclip from their ropes and wrap themselves in blankets he had brought. Their faces were pale, but their eyes shone with relief and gratitude. They had survived a night and morning that could have ended in disaster, thanks to the courage, skill, and selflessness of a man who knew the cliffs better than anyone. The girls' laughter returned slowly, a mixture of joy, relief, and amazement. They shared stories of how they had held on through the night, how they had supported one another, and how the mountain man had guided them to safety. Every word was a reminder that fear could be faced and overcome, that trust and teamwork were powerful tools, and that courage often comes from unexpected sources. By midday, the sun had fully emerged, warming the canyon and drying the rocks. The mountain man helped the girls down the remaining distance, step by careful step, until they reached solid ground at the canyon's base. Families and rescue teams who had been waiting rushed forward, embracing the girls and thanking the man who had saved them. Though he quietly stepped back, avoiding the spotlight, the impact of his actions was clear. He had turned a terrifying ordeal into a story of hope and survival. The 8 Apache girls, exhausted but alive, would never forget that day. They had faced fear, battled exhaustion, and clung to hope through a storm that seemed endless. And they had learned that courage, patience, and the guidance of someone experienced could transform even the most desperate situation into a triumph. The canyon, once a symbol of danger, became a memory of resilience, teamwork, and the unthinkable kindness of a stranger who risked everything to save them. The sun had risen fully over the canyon, casting golden light on the jagged cliffs and the damp earth below. The storm had passed, leaving behind a quiet calm, but the cliffs were still slippery, the rocks slick from rain, and the canyon walls sharp and unforgiving. The 8 Apache girls, though now slightly safer on ledges, were far from fully secure. Their muscles ached, their hands were raw from hours of gripping ropes, and their bodies were stiff from exhaustion. Every movement required careful thought, and every step demanded focus. The mountain man, experienced and alert, knew that the rescue was not over. Even though the immediate danger of the storm had passed, the descent from the cliff to solid ground would be the most challenging part. One wrong move, one slip, and they could face serious injury. He carefully examined each rope, each knot, and each anchor point, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. "We're almost there," he said calmly. "But you need to stay focused and trust me. One step at a time." The girls nodded, trusting him completely. They had already seen his skill and courage, and his calm presence gave them confidence. Marissa, still the unofficial leader of the group, encouraged her friends to breathe deeply, stretch their hands and legs, and prepare for the final stage. "We've survived the night and the storm," she reminded them. "Now we just need to finish this carefully. We can do it." The mountain man began with the girls closest to the ledge that led down to the canyon floor. Using a combination of ropes, knots, and handholds, he guided each one step by step. He spoke to them gently, giving instructions and reassurance. "Place your left foot here," he would say. "Now your right hand there." Slow and steady, each girl followed his words carefully, feeling a mix of fear and determination. The trust they had built in him over the morning made the impossible feel possible. Some sections of the cliff were tricky. Narrow ledges forced the girls to balance carefully, while sharp rocks demanded caution to avoid scrapes or cuts. Occasionally, the mountain man would anchor himself in a difficult position to guide a girl safely across a tricky patch. He moved with precision, using his strength and experience to stabilize both himself and the climber. The girls learned to follow his rhythm, moving when he instructed and pausing when he signaled. Every motion required teamwork, trust, and patience. Despite the challenges, the mountain man kept spirits high. He told stories of his past climbs, lessons learned from the cliffs, and moments when he had faced fear but persevered. His calm storytelling distracted the girls from the discomfort and danger, helping them stay focused on the task at hand. Laughter occasionally broke through the tension, small but powerful reminders that even in difficult moments, joy could exist. Hours passed as the descent continued. The girls' exhaustion was evident, but their determination never wavered. They had survived a night of fear and a morning of careful navigation, and now they were learning the value of perseverance. Each completed step, each safe movement, became a small victory. They encouraged each other constantly. You can do it. Just one more step. Almost there. These words, repeated over and over, were as important as the ropes that held them to the cliff. At one point they reached a section of the cliff where the rocks were particularly sharp, and the ledges barely wide enough for a foot. The mountain man paused, examining the path carefully. "This is the trickiest part," he warned. "Stay close, stay calm, and trust my guidance. We will move slowly, together." The girls followed his instructions exactly, shifting weight carefully, gripping the rope tightly, and supporting one another. Every movement was deliberate, careful, and precise. Even the youngest, Taya, who had been the most frightened, began to find courage in the process. She watched the mountain man and her friends, learning how to balance and plan each step. Each safe move built confidence, and fear slowly gave way to determination. By observing him, she realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The canyon seemed to stretch endlessly, but the mountain man and the girls moved steadily. The sun rose higher, warming the cliffs and drying some of the wet rocks. Small birds appeared, flying between the cliffs, a quiet reminder that life continued despite challenges. Even in the most frightening situations, the natural world seemed to offer comfort. The girls drew strength from these small signs, focusing on progress rather than danger. By midday, the descent had reached a point where the ledges were wider and the ropes less necessary. The mountain man encouraged the girls to take small breaks, stretch their muscles, and drink water.
"You've done amazingly well," he said. "The hardest part is behind us."
"Keep moving carefully, and we'll be on solid ground soon." The girls smiled faintly, their relief growing with every step. They could see the canyon floor approaching, and with it, safety, warmth, and the embrace of their families. Finally, the last few feet required a controlled climb down to the canyon floor. The mountain man guided each girl, one by one, ensuring that no one lost balance or footing. Their hands were numb from gripping ropes for hours, but they followed instructions carefully. Step by step they descended, their excitement and relief growing. The once intimidating cliff now felt like a conquered challenge, a testament to skill, patience, and courage. When all 8 girls were safely on the canyon floor, the mountain man helped them to their feet, offering blankets to warm their chilled bodies. Tears of relief flowed freely as the girls hugged one another, grateful for their survival and for the man who had guided them to safety. The canyon, which had seemed so vast and dangerous, now felt like a place of triumph and learning. They had faced fear, weathered a storm, and experienced a challenge few could imagine. And they had survived. Families and rescue teams arrived shortly afterward, rushing forward with expressions of worry and relief. They hugged the girls tightly, expressing gratitude to the mountain man who quietly stepped back, letting the girl's family celebrate. Though he had saved lives, he preferred to remain modest, believing that helping others was reward enough. Yet everyone recognized that without his skill, patience, and courage, the outcome could have been very different. The girls shared stories of their night on the cliff, of their fear, and of how they had supported one another. They spoke of the mountain man's guidance, of his calm voice and precise instructions, and of the hope he had brought. Their words were full of admiration and gratitude, and each retelling strengthened their sense of accomplishment and resilience. They had faced danger and uncertainty and had emerged stronger, braver, and more connected than ever before. As the sun set over the canyon that evening, the 8 Apache girls rested safely on solid ground. They were tired, sore, and drained, but their spirits were filled with pride and relief. The mountain man had guided them through the most dangerous moments, showing them that courage, skill, and teamwork could overcome even the most difficult challenges. The canyon, once a symbol of fear, had become a memory of triumph, survival, and extraordinary human kindness. And though the girls would always remember the storm, the fear, and the danger, they would also remember the quiet strength of the mountain man, the bond between friends, and the courage that had carried them through when it seemed all hope was lost. The cliffs had tested them, but in the end, they had proven that determination, patience, and trust could turn the impossible into a story of hope and life. The sun was high in the sky, warming the canyon floor and drying the last traces of the morning drizzle. The 8 Apache girls, exhausted from the long ordeal, finally stood on solid ground. Their muscles ached, their hands were raw, and their clothes were damp, but they were alive. Relief poured through them in waves, a mixture of gratitude, pride, and disbelief. They had faced the cliffs, the storm, and hours of uncertainty, and they had survived. Marissa looked around at her friends, her eyes shining with emotion. "We made it," she whispered, almost in awe. The other girls nodded, some smiling through tears. Their hands found one another's, fingers intertwined in a quiet but powerful gesture of unity. They had learned to trust each other in ways that words could not express. Every struggle, every slip, and every fearful moment had brought them closer together, forging bonds that would last a lifetime. Nearby, the mountain man observed quietly, allowing the girls their moment. Though he had guided them through the most dangerous hours, he never sought praise. His satisfaction came from knowing that he had kept them safe. Yet as the families and rescue teams began to arrive, his actions were recognized and celebrated. Parents rushed forward, their faces etched with worry and relief, hugging their children tightly. Tears flowed freely, and laughter mingled with sobs. The canyon floor, which had felt so forbidding just hours earlier, was now filled with warmth, joy, and gratitude. One by one, the girls shared their stories with their families. They spoke of the storm, the fear, and the hours spent dangling from ropes. They described how they had encouraged one another, stayed calm, and worked together to survive. And most importantly, they spoke of the mountain man whose calm voice, careful guidance, and skill had turned a near-impossible situation into a story of survival. Each story emphasized the power of courage, teamwork, and trust, leaving their listeners amazed and grateful. The mountain man stepped forward, and the families approached him with heartfelt thanks. "You saved our daughters," one parent said, tears streaming down their face. "We can never thank you enough." He smiled quietly, nodding. "I just did what anyone would do," he replied simply. It was a team effort. The girls stayed calm, listened carefully, and supported one another. That's why they made it through. Though humble, he knew the truth. His skills had made the difference in the most dangerous moments, but the girls' courage had carried them every step of the way. As the day continued, rescue teams helped the girls dry off, warm up, and eat. Every second day, blankets were wrapped around their shoulders, warm drinks passed to their hands, and gentle encouragement offered at every turn. Though tired, the girls' eyes shone with newfound confidence. They had faced a challenge few could imagine, and had emerged stronger, braver, and more aware of their own resilience. Each small victory during the rescue had built their courage, and now they could reflect on the journey they had completed. The canyon, which had seemed so dangerous and unforgiving, now appeared almost magical in the sunlight. The rocks that had trapped them, the cliffs that had loomed like giants, and the ledges that had challenged their balance, all of it became part of a story of triumph. The girls walked slowly along the canyon floor, savoring each step on solid ground. Every breath of warm, fresh air felt like a gift. Their adventure, once terrifying, had transformed into a lesson in courage, patience, and hope. Marissa gathered her friends for a final moment together. "We did this," she said, her voice strong despite exhaustion. "We survived because we trusted each other, stayed calm, and never gave up. Remember this feeling. It will stay with you forever." The other girls nodded, their faces bright with emotion. They understood now that courage was not something magical. It was built step by step, choice by choice, in moments when fear tried to take over. They had learned that together they could face almost anything. Families took photographs, capturing the relief, joy, and pride of the day. Smiles and laughter echoed through the canyon, blending with the gentle rustling of trees and the distant sound of a river. Each girl felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The cliffs that had once seemed impossible were now a memory of resilience, trust, and determination. They had faced their fears, supported one another, and survived against the odds. The mountain man watched quietly as the girls reunited with their families. Though he had been the guiding hand, the girls had been the true heroes. Their courage, patience, and teamwork had made the rescue possible. In a world where danger can appear suddenly and without warning, the girls had learned that careful thinking, trust, and mutual support can make the impossible possible. The mountain man's role had been vital, but the strength of the girls had shown through every step of the way. As the afternoon turned into evening, the canyon was filled with stories of bravery, support, and triumph. The girls laughed together, shared memories of their ordeal, and reflected on what they had learned. They realized that even in terrifying circumstances, kindness, courage, and skill could guide them to safety. The experience had changed them, instilling confidence and a sense of connection that would remain for the rest of their lives. The families expressed their gratitude once more, and the mountain man quietly slipped away, returning to the cliffs and valleys he knew so well. His presence had been crucial, yet he remained humble, knowing that his actions were only part of a story built on courage, trust, and perseverance. The girls waved to him, their hearts full of gratitude and respect. He had done the unthinkable, facing danger to save them, and they would never forget his selfless courage. As night fell over the canyon, the girls sat together, wrapped in blankets, talking quietly about the day's events. They shared hopes and dreams for the future, knowing now that fear could be faced and overcome with determination and teamwork. They had learned a powerful lesson about life. Challenges, no matter how frightening, could be met with courage, patience, and trust. And when people come together to support each other, even the most difficult situations can end with hope and triumph. The stars began to shine above the canyon, reflecting the light in the girls' eyes. They had survived what seemed impossible. They had faced fear, battled exhaustion, and endured a storm that tested every part of them. And they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. The cliffs, once symbols of danger, were now memories of resilience, trust, and the extraordinary kindness of a stranger who had risked everything to help them. As the night settled, the girls fell asleep under the open sky, safe and warm for the first time in what felt like forever. They dreamed of cliffs, storms, and ropes, but also of courage, friendship, and the mountain man who had guided them through it all. The experience had changed them forever, giving them stories to tell, lessons to remember, and a deep understanding of what it meant to face fear and survive. And so the 8 Apache girls, once trapped and afraid, now rested in safety, their hearts full of gratitude and hope. They had survived the storm, the cliff, and the terrifying night. But more than that, they had learned that courage, patience, trust, and teamwork could overcome even the most daunting challenges. The canyon, once a place of fear, had become a place of triumph, a symbol of human resilience, and a story of hope that would be remembered forever.